Hello friends, I'm Ramon and this is the channel where everything is completely different. Have you ever wondered what life was like at home for famous dictators? Did they have children? Were they henpecked? Were they married? And if so, how did their significant others view their actions and what were those women like? Let's take a closer look at them. Carmen Polo, whose full name was Maria del Carmen Polo y Martínez Valdés, was born on the 11th of June 1900 in Oviedo, Spain, to parents from the provincial nobility. When Carmen's mother died and left her father Felipe with several small children, his sister Isabel helped raise the family. In 1917, Carmen met the young and promising military officer Francisco Franco. He began courting her despite her family's opposition as they considered him socially inferior. Franco's military successes in Morocco and his persistence eventually won her family's support, and they married in October 1923. Carmen embraced the role of a devoted wife, and in 1926 the couple had their only child, a daughter named Maria del Carmen, nicknamed Carmencita. Their happiness was temporarily interrupted in 1931 when the Spanish king Alfonso XIII abdicated and the Second Spanish Republic was proclaimed. The new liberal government did not trust the army and abolished the academy that Franco led. When, in the mid-1930s, social and political chaos broke out in Spain, the government sent Franco to the Canary Islands and placed him under supervision, hoping to prevent him from rising up against the Republic. And today we know that it was in vain. In July 1936, the Civil War broke out. Carmen took her daughter to France aboard a German ship, while Franco successfully led the Foreign Legion into Spain. After 3 years of bloody fighting, Franco emerged victorious, and together with Carmen, she became the most powerful woman in the country for the next 35 years. She moved with Franco to the El Pardo Palace on the outskirts of Madrid. He insisted that the Spanish treat her almost like a queen. At state events, they played the royal march for her and had to address her as La Señora. It was she enforced very effective censorship in the Spanish press, and her greed knew no bounds. She melted down gold medals that cities and Spanish provinces had given her husband and collected jewelry and antiques from flatterers and sycophants. She arranged a royally lavish wedding for her daughter with Cristobal Martínez Bordiú, and she was absolutely delighted by her granddaughter's marriage to Alfonso de Borbón Dampierre, a member of the old Spanish royal family. Franco died on the 20th of November 1975. Before his death, he reached an agreement with the royal family that the monarchy would be restored after his passing. Perhaps in return, King Juan Carlos allowed Carmen to stay for several months in the El Pardo Palace. Afterwards, Carmen moved to an apartment in Madrid where she lived peacefully until her death in 1988. Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler. One of the most famous love stories in human history, perhaps comparable only to Romeo and Juliet, Tristan and Isolde, or Charles and Camilla. Eva was born in Munich on the 6th February 1912. In her youth, she worked as an assistant to photographer Heinrich Hoffmann, who happened to be the official photographer of the NSDAP. And it was here that she met Adolf, who began inviting her to restaurants and to the cinema, or on romantic evening walks by the light of torches and burning books. When they met, he was 40 and she was 17. And 17 is just fine. Especially for Adolf. He could raise and shape her to his own image. Thus, Eva became his secret lover, but after some time she became dissatisfied with her role and attempted suicide by shooting herself. However, she was unsuccessful. But Adolf's niece, Geli Raubal, whom Adolf also wanted to control and dominate, was more successful in this regard. After Adolf came to power, Eva tried to kill herself again. This time she tried to poison herself with pills, but again, unsuccessfully. From this moment on, Adolf paid a bit more attention to Eva. It's April 1945. After their initial successes in the war, German soldiers had been retreating for several years, and the Americans and Russians were now racing to see who would reach Berlin first and who would capture Hitler first. Adolf knows this and is doing everything he can to slow down the advance of the Allied armies. Eva also encourages Hitler to keep fighting and to continue the senseless killing, even involving small children. On the 29th of April, after 16 years of being together, Eva finally got her wish. Adolf married her and Eva couldn't have been happier. Not even the fact that just one day later, they both shot themselves and instead of a honeymoon in the Seychelles or the Maldives, ended up burned to ashes in the yard behind the Berlin bunker could spoil her happiness. Sajida Talfah, born in Tikrit in 1935, had 5 children with her cousin, yes, cousin, the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. Specifically, 3 daughters, Raghd, Rana and Hala, and 2 sons, the infamous Uday and Qusay. In 1986, Saddam married another woman, Samira Shahbandar, even though he was still married to Sajida. Sajida was somewhat unsettled by this, but probably not as much as their son Uday. He believed that by marrying this woman, his inheritance was threatened, and at the same time, he saw the situation as an insult to his mother. So he took justice into his own hands, and at a party held in honor of Susan Mubarak, the wife of then Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, he beat and stabbed to death Saddam's bodyguard and food taster Kamel Hana Gejeyo, whom he believed had introduced Samira to his father. Despite all of this, Sajida never divorced Saddam. You might argue that polygamy is legal in the Arab world. Yes, it is, but there are a few big buts. If a Muslim decides to have more than one wife, he must provide sufficient financial support for all his wives. He must also give each of them the same amount of attention and moral support. Last but not least, such a polygamous marriage requires a ton of official paperwork, the consent of the current wife or wives, and religious advice. In the end, it's not as rosy as it might seem to us European men. Anyway, because of the Gulf War in 1990, Sajida and many members of her family decided to flee, most likely to Switzerland. After the war ended, they returned back to Iraq. In 2003, when US-led forces invaded Iraq and subsequently captured and tried Saddam Hussein for war crimes, genocide, and the torture of civilians, Sajida fled to Qatar. From there, she financed the defense of her captured husband. Even after all that, she remained a devoted wife to him. Nevertheless, 3 years later, Saddam was found guilty and sentenced to death, and just before the end of 2006, he was hanged. According to the latest reports, Sajida is still living somewhere in Qatar. Born on May 2nd, 1952, however, there are 2 different versions regarding her origins. The first version is that she comes from the eastern Libyan Barasa tribe and was born in the city of Baida. The second version is that she was born as Safia Farkash to Hungarian parents in Mostar, Bosnia and Herzegovina. The similarity between the Arabic name and the Hungarian one is almost unbelievable. But who really knows how it actually was? Safia trained as a nurse, and that's how she met Muammar Gaddafi when he was hospitalized with appendicitis in 1970. That same year, they got married in Tripoli and later had sons Saif al-Islam, al-Sadi, Mutasim, Hannibal, Muammar, Saif al-Arab and Kamis, as well as their only daughter, Aisha. As is often the case with the wives of dictators, Safia was initially kept out of the public eye. She only began to appear and make herself known in public around 2009, but unlike other DAOs, that is, dictators' wives, she didn't have much in the way of political ambitions. In 2008, at a meeting of African Union leaders, Safia was elected Vice President of the Organization of African First Ladies, even though she did not attend the meeting and never participated in any of its related activities. Instead of politics, she focused her efforts on business. She owns the airline Burak Air, which is based at Mitiga Airport near Tripoli. She operates it with her husband's approval, even though it is a direct competitor to the Libyan national carrier and holds a monopoly on transporting Libyan pilgrims to Mecca. And since every Muslim must make the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in their lifetime, it seems like a very lucrative business. That is, aside from the fact that you're the wife of a guy who runs a country with a rather large oil reserve. After the outbreak of the Libyan civil war in February 2011, Safia stayed with her husband in Tripoli. However, when things got really tough, she was forced to leave with her daughter and 2 sons to Algeria, from where they emigrated to Oman a year later. Meanwhile, in October, Gaddafi was captured, shot and lynched. In April 2016, the Libyan government allowed her to return to her homeland, and we can assume that she eventually went back to Libya. Tatyana Karimova was born on the 26th of August 1945 to a military Russian Uzbek family. She worked as a research scientist at the Economic Institute of the Academy of Sciences in Uzbekistan. She married Islam in 1967 and together they had 2 daughters, Gulnara and Lola. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Islam became the absolute ruler of Uzbekistan for a long quarter of a century. And his wife logically became the first lady, who, together with him, reveled in their newly acquired power. Almost immediately after taking office, they made sure that their critics disappeared from the country, that members of the opposition kept silent, and, in short, that no one opposed them. They had no qualms about torturing inconvenient people. Alleged terrorists were killed by being submerged in a bath of boiling water, and another unusual form of punishment was the rape of family members in front of the accused. At the same time, their regime forced local children and students to harvest cotton on plantations through forced labor, of course without any right to compensation. The profits from the sale of cotton then went straight into the private pockets of Karimov's family. Their eldest daughter, Gulnara, became famous for accusing her younger sister of witchcraft on Twitter and accusing her mother of planning to destroy her because of her cousin, who supposedly had some compromising information about Tatyana. Gulnara was then placed under house arrest and accused of corruption. Thanks to bribes, extortion, and fraud involving state contracts, she allegedly made about $1 billion. But who knows if that's even true, or if it's just revenge from an angry mother. Tatyana was such an influential figure that after Islam's death in 2016, she even chose her husband's successor. With that, I'd like to end the second part of our journey through the palaces and bedrooms of dictators, and especially their sometimes far too expensive other halves. I sincerely hope that you... Did you like the video? If so, then share, like, subscribe, hit the bell, you know the drill. See you next time for the continuation, and don't forget, everything is completely different than it seems.